Okay. Rambam. Hilchos matnas aniyim, the laws of gifts to the poor, and we are actually concluding those laws today. Charity is considered as a vow. Therefore, one who says, I pledge to give a seller to charity, or I will give this seller to charity, is obligated to give it to charity immediately. Right? Hmm. If he delays, he transgresses the commandment against delaying the observance of one's vow. Wow. Second. Okay. For he has the capacity to make the gift immediately, and generally there are poor people at hand. If there's no poor people at hand, he should set aside the donation, put it away until he finds poor people. Right? This is in a situation where there isn't a community, you know, fund, a community fund that's taking care. Because we'll see that how, if there is, and then, that makes it different. If he made a stipulation that he was not obligated to make a donation until he finds a poor person or people, he does not have to separate until the poor are at hand. Similarly, if he made a stipulation at the time he made his vow to charity or pledge his donation that the trustees of a charitable fund could exchange it for gold, they are permitted to do so. Actually, that's so good. He's not that way. That point. Okay. When a person extends a vow made to charity, he is obligated as the case with regard to other vows. What is implied? If he said this seller is like the one given to charity, it is also charity. When a person sets aside a seller and says, this is charity, and then takes another seller and says, and this, the second is also charity, even though he did not say so explicitly. Right. Okay, here we're going into language of what is, you know, actual monies that are designated. Okay. When a person takes a vow to give charity, but he does not remember how much he vowed to give, he should give until he says, I did not intend to give this much. Following rules apply both to a person who says, this sela is charity, and the one who says, I pledge a sela for charity, and sets it aside. If he desires to exchange it with another coin, he is permitted to do so. Once it reaches the hand of the treasurer of the charity, it is forbidden to be exchanged. If the treasurer of the charity desires to exchange the common currency for dinarim, they are not permitted to do so, lest they be suspect for profiting on the exchange. Okay. If there were no poor among those to distribute the funds, they should have others exchange the coins, but they should not do so themselves. Right, so there won't be a suspicion that they are profiting from it. If the poor would benefit from the delay of the money, in the possession of a charity collector, so they could motivate others to give. That charity collector may borrow the money and pay when the funds are required. Interesting. For charity does not resemble funds dedicated to temple treasury from which it is forbidden to benefit. Right. If it belongs to temple treasury, so you can't benefit from it. But this is not belonging. It's something that you need to give to the poor. So if you need to hold on to it for whatever reason, you're going to motivate others to give. So he explains, because once you give money, you kind of feel, okay, I did my obligation. But let's say there's a poor person. Remember, we're basing here on a very simple biblical idea. Someone came to you, and he's got married off his daughter. So biblically, you have to pay everything. If you're a wealthy person, let's say you're a wealthy person, you have to pay everything. Right? If you're not a wealthy person, we're talking about this community person, right? Someone in your community or your family. Actually, it's in your family. Better yet, someone in your family has to make a wedding. They're poor. They can't afford to make the wedding. Yeah, they're part of your family. You have an obligation to pay for the entire wedding, unless you can't, right? Unless you're not able to. Now that's up to up to 20%, right? We're not talking about that you become destined to become this or give more than 20%. You're not obliged.
20% of cost of the weddings.
No, 20% of your money, right? Because up to 20% you should give, right? So that's so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about when there is, even though he speaks about it, yeah, in such a manner. So let's say the guy came to you and you've got more monies, you've got lots of land, and I don't know what that means if you have to sell off any land because of that. You have to help this person. But if you were to give the money right away, so then you feel okay, you've done your obligation. But if you didn't give it and you have to collect more money, whether it's because you have to sell some property or you lent somebody money and they owe it to you and you're waiting for it so you can give that money, whatever the circumstance is. The point is, it's much more motivating to hold on to the money and sort of like feel that I've got to collect more, that because once I gave the money, I may not feel that I won't feel the same obligation to give more. So we're speaking in a very biblical, right, instance. Now, of course, if you don't have the money, or it's not, if it's someone of the community, that the whole community is obligated to help out, right? So that's not the instance we're talking about over here. We're talking an instance, it's your family. It's your uncle that is destitute, and he's got to marry off his daughter, and you're the nephew. Well, yeah, it falls on you. That I'm talking about the person's wealthy and they can do it, right? They have the means. They don't have the means. That's then you can give towards it. Then the whole thing doesn't fall on you. We're giving over here an example of where it may be that it falls completely on you, right?
Otherwise, there are other numbers that are collectively assist.
Now, just to let you know that today, for all intents and purposes, this is a biblical law we're talking about. For all intents and purposes, that none of that exists, that it falls on one person, because there's a community infrastructure of people collect, right? They collect there's institutions collect for food. There's institutions collect for marrying off a girl, right? Hachnasus kala, as it's called, right? So there's institutions for everything that they're helping. So it doesn't fall on an individual. But that's because there's institutions. We're talking about a biblical law, that the biblical law doesn't mandate institutions. Biblical law mandates a person, right? That's rabbinical. Yeah, actually, I don't even think there's anything biblical about institutions, charitable institutions, that is. I think it's all rabbinic.
But it is all
It
right.
kind of makes sense.
Because perhaps the institution can act as a person on behalf of persons, because I mean the institution would collect.
Yeah, exactly what that's the point I'm making though. The point I'm making, and we have to understand what Rambam is teaching us. He's teaching us here the biblical law right now, not teaching us the rabbinic law. Later on, he's going to do that. I don't know if it's, I don't remember if it's the next chapter or whatever. The last chapter might be that he teaches us though the principles of what it means in a community, that a community has an infrastructure, right? That's Torah doesn't speak about, biblical law doesn't speak about an infrastructure. I shouldn't say it does on some level, but I don't know how much it's very, yeah. Anyway, whatever. This discussion is on speaking about me, my obligation, right? What's my obligation? Okay. So now he's just speaking about the money. Let's say, if you set aside, you know, if you set aside this money to the temple treasury, you got to give this and you can't have any benefit from it. This I'm giving to the temple treasury. But if I'm giving this to the poor, I could benefit from it. It's not inherent, it's not intrinsically dedicated. It's the value that's dedicated. So it's intrinsic. So therefore, therefore I could hold on to it and I'll give it right away if that's going to motivate me to collect more money to give. Follow? That's what we're talking
Consecrated, what is money consecrated?
about. Not today, because we're not giving to the temple treasury.
No. If you consecrate a certain amount,
Consecrated means
it's
it doesn't
open.
belong to you now, it belongs to the temple treasury. You can't benefit from it. That's what it means. Right. We learned that. No, they're working outside. They're doing something outside. That was more not money, because you didn't dedicate money really. You dedicated property, your property, you dedicated an animal. This animal I'm dedicating as an offering. That's, then the animal is, it's got a certain holiness to it now that you can't benefit from it. So, for example, you can't now. Okay, I can't now put a load on it and take that load, to do work for me. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the temple treasury, right? It's holy. Okay. So number 6, when a person donates a candelabra or a lamp to a synagogue, it is forbidden to exchange it. If it is for sacramental purposes, it is permitted to exchange it, even though the name of the donor is still associated with it. It's said that so-and-so's candelabra, so-and-so's lamp. If the name of the donor is no longer associated with it, it may be exchanged, even for matters that are not sacramental in nature. Interesting.
Okay, so ask what is the definition of sacramental in this case? What is the definition of sacramental in this case? So what is the difference between donating the item to a synagogue and if the item is for sacramental purpose, sacramental use? What is it?
I don't know. I'm not certain. I don't know. Okay, when does the above apply? I know I have to look more into that. When the donor is Jewish, if however the donor is not Jewish, it's forbidden to exchange it for even for matters that are sacramental in nature, as long as the name of the donor is still associated with it. We fear that a non-Jew might say, "I some consecrated article to the Jewish synagogues," and they sold it for their own purposes. Right? They think that when a non-Jew seeks to make a donation to temple treasury, initially we do not accept it. If, however, it is taken from him, we do not return it to him. If it was a specific article, a beam, a stone, we return it to him so that there will not be a specific entity in the temple associated with non-Jews, as it says, it is not for you. Right? It has to come only from Jewish giving, together with the building of the temple of God. For synagogue, by contrast, we accepted donations. Even if they say, "I'm donating according to the intent of the Jewish people," if he does not say so, it must be intoned for perhaps his intended to consecrate it was to God. We did not receive donation from the walls of Jerusalem and the aqueduct in that city, and the portion or remembrance of certain things are only to be right. It is for only for a Jewish that Jews should be involved in it. It's forbidden for a Jew to receive charity from a non-Jew in public if he's unable to subsist on charity by Jews, and it's permissible to receive charity from non-Jews in private. It is permitted. When a Gentile king or official sends money to the Jewish charity, we not return it to him so as not to jeopardize peaceful relations with the king. Instead, we take the charity from him and give it to non-Jews that are poor in secret, so that the king will not hear. Wow. Why don't you take? Why can't the Jew take from a non-Jew publicly? Because Zachil Hashem. What do you mean? How important it is that Jews take care of each other. That if a Jew is not being taken care of by a fellow Jews, that's a profaning God. That's profaning God. That's a chil Hashem. And therefore, if you're taking it from non-Jews publicly, what you're saying is the Jews didn't take care of me and I had to come on to the non-Jews. That's a terrible thing. What do you mean a Jew wasn't taken care of? Now, if in the fact, right, a Jew, it's not possible for, he needs to receive from a non-Jew in order to subsist, then but take it privately, right? That's permitted because we don't want that. Oh, it's that the Jews are not taking care of their fellow Jews. Wow, that's pretty. But a non-Jewish king, we don't want to start up and jeopardize peace, so therefore we accept it. But we give it to non-Jewish people. Because remember, we learned that yesterday, that Jewish people are obliged to help non-Jews and to be charitable to non-Jews, right? There's a hierarchy of things that we learned and we'll learn, right? Like what we just mentioned, your own family is first, extended family. You have an obligation. Then you have your community, and then you can take poor from another city, but you first the poor in your city, right?
How different is this to what happens a lot these days where, let's say, a lot of Christian organizations support Jewish organizations, even though it's not charity, but it's going to India. How do these charity goes to Jews? But how does it differ in terms of the nuance?
That's a very good question.
Especially since a lot of these Christian organizations have an ulterior motive in supporting Jewish
Right.
organizations.
That becomes a bit of an issue. I'm not exactly certain. I know that it's a good question, right? see, like, so what we just said was like, if a poor person, a poor Jew is going to go and publicly receives from a non-Jew, so people look and say, oh, you know, the Jews ain't taking care of their own. That's profaning God's name. But if money comes in from an organization, if their name was put on bright lights, maybe that would be a bit of an issue because you're giving sort of edifying, this organization that believes something that's not Jewish, right? That would be a problem to edify them in any way. To receive from them is different, though. Yeah. If they gave which this should be, if we got $1 million from the, you know, the Catholic Church over here, and they said, well, put our name on the building, that would probably be a problem.
But sometimes it's when it can that, maybe the donors themselves make the announcement that we have donated too.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's less. Yeah, that might be an issue too. Yeah, for sure.
And it's very good. I mean,
Right.
I'm aware of this. That's
Yeah. Definitely. It's a question. I think there's responsa on it. I just don't know offhand. Well, we have to look it up. Okay, number 10, the redemption of captives receives priority over sustaining the poor and providing them with clothing. Indeed, there's no greater mitzvah than redemption of captives, for the captive is among. Nimi? Okay. Shkoyach. Als beseder?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Indeed, there's no greater mitzvah than the redemption of captives, for a captive is among those who are hungry, thirsty, and unclothed, and he is in mortal peril. So that's the first thing, right? I mean, when we're talking about tzedakah over here, we're not talking about Hamas now. If we could give Hamas money to get back the captives, that would have been thought of a long time ago. They ain't taking money, right? They don't want lives. So it's a whole different halachic issue, which we, in the previous course, by the way, colorful profiles, the fourth class, if you remember, we dealt with about captives throughout history. But throughout history is very different. The reason for captives that were taken was for money. It was for money, right? That's what it was for. So to redeem those captives, it was the ultimate mitzvah. That's not today, though. That's not what it's about today. No, they're not taking for money. They're taken for lives. They're taken in order to destroy the Jewish people. Okay, if someone pays no attention to his redemption, he violates the negative commandment. Do not hurt or close your hand. Do not stand by when the blood of your neighbor is in danger. You shall not oppress him with exhausting work in your presence, and he has negated the observance of the positive commandments. He shall certainly open up a hand to him, and your brother shall live with you. All these are positive commandments. Love your neighbors yourself. Save those who have taken for death, and many other decrees of this nature. There is no mitzvah as great as the redemption of captives. Again, there's actually a bigger mitzvah today what's going on in Gaza than redeeming the captives. You know what that is? Destroying Hamas.
So that supersedes.
That supersedes the captives. Yeah. Because the captives are a handful of people, right? Which, God forbid, to belittle that, not belittling it. Destroying Hamas is saving a nation in the end of, another October 7th. So that's about a national issue versus personal. I mean, the captives are personal in the sense of, yeah, personal in the sense that it's about individuals, right? Of course, it affects the national interest, and it affects us all deeply as fellow Jews, right? We're talking about a halachic parameter, the halachic parameter of defeating the enemy that wants to annihilate you. That is a much greater priority than hostages. Yeah. No, that's halacha. I'm saying that's in halacha. Here it's not that. I'm saying I just want to point out because here it sounds like, oh, it's the greatest thing. So, no, it's not greater than what we're talking about. In the reference to hostages that could be redeemed with money, the greatest way you could use your money is to redeem those hostages rather than to feed the poor. Okay, number 11. When the inhabitants of a city collect money for building synagogue and the purpose associated with the mitzvah arose, and they may use the money for that purpose. All right, so they took the money for the synagogue. They could use it for this. Wow. If they purchase stones and beams, they should not sell them and use the proceeds for the purpose associated with the mitzvah other than the redemption of captives. So if you bought stones and beams to build the synagogue, right, you can't use anything else with those beams, those stones, except for the mitzvah of redeeming captives. Even though they brought the stones to the building site, cut the beams and shaped them to the size and prepared everything for the building, it should not be sold, but not only for the sake of redeeming captives. Let's say another mitzvah you want to sell it for. You can't, but only for this mitzvah. If they built the synagogue and completed it, it should not be sold. Instead, the funds necessary to redeem captives should be raised from the community. So again, here, this to me is yeah, okay. See, number 12. We do not redeem captives for more than their worth, for the benefit of the world at large, for the enemies will not pursue people to hold them captive. So that enemies will not pursue, right? Because, by the way, Torah studies, not Torah studies, but the JLI course, phenomenal course that we just did this spring, colorful profiles, right? So we did the Maharam from Rottenburg, who wouldn't allow, he was the greatest sage in his generation, wouldn't allow himself to be redeemed because they wanted a ridiculous amount for him, and he died in prison. We notice his captives and escaping for the benefit of the world at large, so that the enemies will not oppress the captives seriously and be very strict when guarding them. Wow. See how halacha, this is like amazing. You would think, help them to escape. But what you will do then, you're going to cause the next captive that they're going to take, that they're going to guard them and be much more strict upon them. The Maharam from Rottenburg was in prison, but he wasn't in prison like he had students that he was able to. The students came to him and learned with him. I mean, obviously he was able to learn Torah. So not like a regular imprisonment. So here, if you're going to help the person escape, the next ones that they're going to take captive are going to be in much more serious. Wow, that's fascinating. As you got to work with the system, right? As evil as it is, unjust as it is, Torah cares, about the facts on the field. That's phenomenal. When a person has sold himself and his children as servants to non-Jews, or borrowed money from them, and they held him captive or imprisoned him because of failure to pay the loan. And that happened, by the way, a lot of times, and that's why they took them into prison. Right? Is a mitzvah to redeem him the first or the second time he is held. If it happens the third time, we do not redeem him. We do, however, redeem the sons after the father's passing. In other words, you're not making payment. Why were you taken captive? Because you failed, right? You went bankrupt. So they put you into jail. Well, okay, we'll help you first and second time, but we're not going to help you afterwards. But your children will help after you pass away. Wow. If they sought to kill him, we redeem him from their hands, even if he was held captive several times. That's different, right? Again, because they didn't hold captive in order to kill the person, they wanted their money. That's all they wanted, right? So, but if he's going to be in mortal danger, that's a different story. When a servant is held captive, since he immersed himself in the mikvah and accepted the mitzvahs, he should be redeemed like a Jew and he's taken captive. Wow. When a captive abandons his faith, even in regard to one mission, he eats meat from animals that were not ritually slaughtered, the intent of angering God or the like, is forbidden to redeem him. Wow. A woman receives precedence over a man with regard to being given sustenance, clothing, and to be redeemed from captivity. Rationale is that it is common for a man to beg, but not for a woman, and this is extremely embarrassing for her. So a man to go around, right? You don't see women beggars too much. It's very embarrassing. They're much more sensitive women. So if they were held in captivity and they were both solicited for transgression, the man should be redeemed first, because this is not ordinary for him. Wow. In other words, talking about rape over here of man and woman, right? That's what we're talking about. A male, female, or friend come seeking assistance in marriage. We assist the woman before the man, because woman's shame is greater. She should be given less than the weight of 6.25 denarim of pure silver. Should not be given less. I'm sorry. Thank you. If the treasury or the charitable fund has the means, we give the money according to her honor. So now you see we're speaking about charitable fund, which we didn't speak earlier. If there are many poor people or many captives and one does not have the means to provide sustenance or clothing for all of them or to redeem all of them, a Kohen is given precedence over a Levite is given precedence over Israel is given precedence over a Chala, over Shtuki, over a Sufi, over a Mamzer, over a Nitan, over a convert. As Rashi said, Nitan grew up in holiness, a convert granted precedence over a freed slave, and originally among those who were cursed. When does the above apply? When two captives were equal knowledge. If, however, a high priest was unlearned and a mamzer was a Torah scholar, the Torah scholar receives precedence, right? In other words, it isn't enough money we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. Whoever surpasses his colleague in knowledge receives precedence over his colleague. If, however, one of the poor of the captives is one's teacher or father, his father or teacher who is a Torah scholar receives precedence over another who surpasses them in wisdom. Chapter 9, let's do this. In every city where Jews live, they are obligated to appoint faithful men and renowned as trustees of a charitable fund. They should circulate among the people on Friday to Friday and take from each person the appropriate, what is appropriate for him to give, an assessment made upon him. They then allocate the money from Friday to Friday, giving each poor person sufficient food for 7 days. This is called kupa. You know what's interesting? Didn't bring a verse over here. I think this is rabbinic law, not biblical law. Just give me a second. That to make a charitable fund.
Oh,
That's no, okay. Just curious. All right, amazing folks, amazing as always. All right, God bless you all.